Welcome back to another episode of Drilling Deeper, everybody. This is episode 32. We're going to have Chris Williamson, MSHA Assistant Secretary, with us. I'm Kevin Yannick, Editor-in-Chief of Pitt and Quarry, and we've got Jack Kapansky once again here on episode 32. Jack, how are you?
Good. Glad to be back in the office. Happy New Year. Have a good holiday season.
It was great.
Good.
Came and went, and here we are in 2025.
Oh, man. That's surreal.
The exciting times on Drilling Deeper in the new year. We're going to have a whole other slate of episodes coming in this new year, and obviously this is our first. We've got Chris Williamson, the Assistant Secretary of the Mine Safety and Health Administration, who's going to be on the show today. I was fortunate, Jack, to visit with the Assistant Secretary on December 20th, so right before the holidays. And interesting timing on the visit here because he's going to be the Assistant Secretary for another 6 days. You know, as anybody who's familiar with the inner workings of MSHA, they know that, you know, a new administration comes in means all the people heading agencies go on out the door. So, you know, we actually had Chris Williamson reach out to us, or his team did, ahead of the holidays to do some content and share some messaging with us. And it was the second time I had the opportunity to visit with him. And, you know, it was a good conversation. You know, we're going to play it here in a bit, Jack. But obviously we're keeping tabs on kind of all things MSHA. A lot of times we're putting out news related to fatalities and you know, best practices related to safety, messaging from the agency that our readers obviously need to know about, rulemaking updates, those sorts of things. And we kind of got into a lot of different things with the Assistant Secretary, or the outgoing one, here in another week or so, Jack. So looking forward to playing this interview here in a bit.
Yeah, a little peek behind the curtain kind of for the listeners. It was kind of interesting how that came about. I think you and I were having a meeting or planning out, I think, our upcoming issue or what we were going to do past or post holiday break, and I get back to my desk and there's a voicemail, and I pick it up and it's someone from obviously Department of Labor, MSHA, whatever part of the department they were from, and we had just put out a piece about, I think it was fatalities or maybe it was something MSHA had going on. And she starts sort of giving me her name and her title and everything. I'm like, oh man, what did I mess up?
What did we do wrong, right?
What do I have to fess up to? What do I got to fix? And she's like, yeah, just wanted to offer up an opportunity tomorrow to talk to Chris Williamson. And I'm like, oh. So I jotted down her info and I immediately ran back into your office. I'm like, Kevin, tomorrow, 1 p.m., Chris Williamson, this is happening. And you're like, okay. So it was just kind of a wild coincidence of, I think you had even maybe talked a little bit about wanting to talk to him before he went out.
That's
and then
right.
All of a sudden this just sort of fell into our laps. And I'm like, it's a Christmas miracle.
That's right. It totally was. I had about 30 minutes with the Assistant Secretary, and we covered a variety of topics, as you can imagine. Kind of my goal, Jack, as I was thinking ahead of that reach out to you, that we wanted to engage Chris Williamson, was just to kind of get an understanding of, the goals that he undertook or tried to pursue at the agency. Obviously the silica rule came about. We saw some work on mobile equipment, a surface mobile equipment rule, during his tenure, and actually the conversation that we had got into some areas that I didn't expect, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. But whether it's technology that's out there or coming that can help aggregate operations, or the idea of MSHA and the industry working together, there's a little bit of something for everybody out there listening. Because if you're working in a mine and you're under the purview of the Mine Safety and Health Administration, it's good to have an understanding of what their goals are. And, Chris Williamson put those out there. And should we play the interview, Jack?
I have never been more ready, Kevin. Let's play it.
Let's just play it.
Let's do it.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson, for getting together today to talk about MSHA developments, some of the goals you had, some of the pursuits that you undertook. But just to start, I wanted to kind of ask a big picture question, kind of a totality question for you as it relates to the agency. But when you set foot there, and when you're going through the process of getting to MSHA and taking on that leading role, what did you determine you wanted to be your leading goals at that time? And, as you kind of look back 3.5 or so years since then, do you feel like you met those marks? Where did you come down at the end?
It's a really good question. I think the short answer is yes, and I'll explain. So, it was no secret, and I right from the jump let everybody know that doing an updated health standard to better protect miners from exposure to toxic silica dust was a top priority of mine. And we did that. And so, and we're in the process of implementing the rule and also, looking towards the beginning of the enforcement of it, which on the coal side will start this April, and the metal non-metal side still got a little bit more time, which, that was in response to comments that we received during the rulemaking and just an acknowledgement that, we need to all work together and need a little bit more time to do that, to give people time to work through those issues and to ultimately get to a place to where, the rule will work best for everybody and ultimately be the most protective for minors. So, and we also, while we were going through that rulemaking, did a silica enforcement initiative, recognizing, hey, we got some tools we can use now to better prevent, and work with everyone in the industry to better protect minors from, exposure to silica based on our existing standards and just things that we already do. So, and to highlight and, make that issue more prominent. So that was one of the priorities. But one of the other ones was just as simple as, for me, having been at MSHA before and understand and growing up in a mining community and seeing what MSHA can do and really the impact it can have, knowing that, I wanted to leave the agency in a better place than when I inherited. And that should be the goal of any political appointee or any senior leader that comes in and out. You should always want to do that. And, I think on a number of fronts, including one I'll get a little bit more specific on, we've done that. I mean, you can always do more. And obviously there was more that I would have liked to been able a chance to do. But, I think we are leaving the agency in a better place than when we got it. And especially on one key issue, which is staffing. It's critically important at MSHA to make sure that you're always, especially on the enforcement side, that you're always bringing in new inspectors, that you're always backfilling people when they leave, because you can't just, as you can't just pull people off the street and say, hey, go inspect that quarry, go inspect that piece of equipment, right? Like, make sure that it's operating correctly. Go do all the different things that MSHA inspectors do every day. Go take that health sample to see what the silica exposure level is, or noise, or all those things that MSHA inspectors do every day. So even people with a lot of really good mining experience, which we have hired a number of really good people with good mining experience lately, they still have to go through the training process, and that can be a couple years, and then on the job training before they're really good inspectors. So one of the things that we've done is, since I came on as assistant secretary in April of 2022, is we've added a little more than 100 people to our enforcement ranks, which we built back up the team. And when I inherited the agency, the staffing levels were at historical lows and there were critical positions that had not been filled. And so we made that a priority. And what happens is not only do you have shorter number of people, which, just causes more people to do things. And the biggest thing that our resources are devoted to is this inspections that we do. So, once you do those, if you don't have people and you can't spread that out, then it doesn't leave a lot to do a lot more. And so, we built back up the team, but you have to do that because otherwise you get a hole if you don't constantly replace people as they leave. So you have the double-edged sword of essentially not having enough people, but then you bring people in and you can't even use them to do inspections or things. It takes 2+ years to train them and everything. So that's why you got to constantly be replacing and have a pipeline of people coming in. And so, we've done a pretty good job of, making a lot of progress climbing out of the hole that we were in. And unfortunately, that's happened in the agency before. And it's been highlighted in things like the Upper Big Branch internal review is a real problem and the effect that it has on the agency. And so we did a good job of making that a priority, because whether it's implementing the silica rule or doing impact inspections or just being able to get our regular 2s and 4s done, but also all the outreach that we do. And, we've been very active in terms of not just enforcement things, but partnering with operators and labor and everybody in the mining community on a number of things. And so, it allows us to do those things too that have a real impact. So that's kind of the second thing. And then, the third thing I would say, I didn't expect to have, like a lot of other people, I was a little bit taken aback last year by the spike in fatalities. I mean, anybody that comes into this role at MSHA should be able to pretty quickly say, focusing on preventing fatal and serious accidents is a priority. We all agree on that one. That one's pretty easy across the board. And, so last year we had an unanticipated spike, but MSHA saw that come on fairly early, and we responded accordingly, and not only just in enforcement, but through using all of our tools. And I sent an open letter to the mining community, and I asked everybody to focus on this and make it a priority. And we've worked together with everybody, and and that was, you all regularly do articles about it and track that. I know, and I see them, and that was one of the reasons why we reached out, because I saw the latest one. And I hate to characterize that there's been 28 fatalities as something positive, because that's still 28 too many, but it's certainly a lot better than the 40 where the industry was at last year. And that's a significant reduction of roughly about 30%. And that's, MSHA led and asked everybody to focus with and partner with us to do something about that. And I'm not here to take credit that it was just MSHA that did that, but it was all of our collective efforts. And, so I've said a lot of thank yous, and I think we all made a difference in the way that I said, if we all work together, we can maximize our impact here. And there's still more work to be done there to drive it down even lower. And, I think the agency's well positioned to continue to do that. And, my hope is that that'll be a focal point of the next administration, is to continue to, try to prioritize keeping that number as low as possible. And so, I'd say those are three big things that, were priorities that, I think we've accomplished and have been really important, and, has been consistent with just the broader priorities of this administration and this president, is, being very worker centered and worker focused. And certainly that's, from a safety and health perspective, really important. I'll give you a bonus one real quick that was something that sort of evolved over the last couple years. But, you may have noticed that, we went to a couple different aggregate sites, but we also went to some iron mines. And, one of the things that I did, and the acting secretary of labor, Julie Sue, did, is we went and visited mine sites and didn't just go do a visit and leave. We had conversations about, mining jobs being good jobs and how important they are to the miners and their families and the communities, and not just how the local impact, but how all those things connect to, infrastructure and just the larger economic impact and national security, and all these things that are important to all of us begin at a mine site, whether that's in, the one we visited in Wisconsin, or the one we visited in Nevada, or up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where we went to the iron mine, all across the board. And so we wanted to make sure that people knew that where that all started from was in those local communities, and to really talk about mining jobs as being good jobs. But they, a core tenet of that is making sure they're safe and healthy jobs. So trying to help explain, why the industry is so important to everybody, and all of everything we do, from the roads and bridges we drive on and take our kids to school on, to everything else. That was something that, I didn't go into this job. I knew that I wanted to be miner focused, and I already at that point had an appreciation for miners, including, coming from a family of miners and growing up in a place so nobody had to teach me that, but being able to connect it to the broader administration's priorities and all these big picture things, and to be able to help explain that and share those stories and really put those miners front and center, was a real special thing to do too, and was important.
Yeah, you're touching on something I didn't expect you to discuss, but just the idea of the value the industry provides. It's something that we talk about as a magazine, and within our niche of mining, which would be aggregates, crushed stone, sand, and gravel, that we struggle as an industry to explain the value to the public, and to legislators when we need to put money behind infrastructure and things like that. Is there an opportunity for the industry and MSHA to work more hand in hand to talk about the value the way you're describing? I guess I'm thinking more hour, but is that a real opportunity to better explain the story behind the mining companies out there?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, and I would argue we've already done that, and that ought to be something we kind of put a roadmap or laid a foundation that anybody ought to be able to pick up and do it. Because one of the things that I found to be very valuable that we I think successfully did, and then we also got had coverage and local and different types of media that covered the story, but it's making obviously you focus on the industry and its value, but you also talk about how important it is to the people too and their families and doing being able to do that whole story. But assistant secretaries and people in leadership positions, they go visit mine sites all the time, and I've done plenty of that, and so those are some of my best days that I've had. And you can always learn more, and it's important to understand how the processes work and the different things if you're going to regulate it, and to have those conversations. And I love spending time with miners. But what we learned and what was really valuable in that is not just do a visit, but then have like a roundtable discussion or sit around and talk about like what the industry means and what it means to all these different points to really, tie those things together. And, we did that. And that's a pretty good model that I think, yeah, can certainly be used there. And again, there were different layers to it. And we were very clear and didn't have, obviously didn't have any objection from the mine operators we worked with on this either, but that talking about safety and health, has to be part of that being a good job. And that's an important part of the industry too. But, some of the ones we visited as well were represented by the operating engineers. So the workers were represented. And it also highlighted the importance of labor management partnerships and how, the value that brings to the table as well. And so we were able that was part of these conversations. And, that's not always going to be present at every mine site, but, we talked about that. And I visited I visited a number of aggregate sites as assistant secretary, but I did a visit up in Connecticut, and it was focused on total worker health and mental health and some of the labor management partnerships that were there. It was a CRH company, Tilcon in Connecticut, and the partnership that they have with the operating engineers local up there, and doing a number of things. I mean, it was great to see how you can do those things, and to hear from the workers who are benefiting from it, and how we're stronger when we work together all across the board than when we kind of do our own thing or siloed. So MSHA's obviously got its North Star and its sort of core mission that Congress gave it, which is making sure that safety and health of the miners are always the top priority and concern in the mining industry, and that's what MSHA does. But I think MSHA is very effective in being involved in those broader conversations and things too, and certainly has the ability to talk about it from the safety and health angle too. But all those things are going to be even more important as I think mining continues to pick up with, as we see more and more of the infrastructure programs come into place. There's going to be a focus on critical minerals, all those, and we just have to make sure that everybody that does that work, that safety and health continues to be a core principle and a priority in it. But those can be good jobs that support families and communities that, we heard that. And there are a lot of those places we went and visited. There were, multiple generations of people who'd worked at the same mine site. So those are good things to highlight and talk about, some of the positives that you can talk about from the industry's perspective that don't always get out there. So.
If I can pick up on one more point, one of your 4 points you made in your opening comments, you're talking about mining accidents, the fatal accidents, and we saw those numbers. They're near all-time lows. So we continue to largely year to year make these gains. But I wanted to ask a couple questions related to that. So, this year, as we're keeping tabs on what's happening out there, looking at the MSHA reports online, and we just saw we were trending really well for 7 months, and all of a sudden August, September roll around, and I think there were 13 accidents during that stretch. I guess one question, like, do you have a sense that there's no science behind it, I guess, but have you picked up on anything as to why do accidents happen in clusters, or is there no rhyme or reason to it, I suppose? Or like, what's happening that allows them to transpire in such a way? And then secondarily, I guess I wanted to ask, did you look more outwardly? What role might technology play in mitigating mining accidents I was talking with a technology provider at Mine Expo a couple months ago, and he was sharing how, they're trying to automate almost everything that moves. And, MSHA has been very proactive on mobile equipment, talking about powered haulage and machinery. So, I mean, the idea of maybe automating or taking the people away from the machines or the things that are causing the accidents seems like an opportunity, although I don't know that we're there yet. But so I guess the trends on like why are accidents happening the way they are, and then technology is a way to maybe mitigate that further.
Sure. So, and I know that you all track it very closely, and I probably could maybe speak a little bit more about that now than I would have probably been willing to back earlier in the year. And I'll say it from this perspective, right? Like, they had gone down even more significantly than where we're gonna, knock on wood. There's still, even part of me is a little hesitant to say too much on December 20th, right?
Right.
But at least to date, right? Like they've gone down, and that's a good thing for everybody. But they were on track, as you said, to potentially be the lowest on record, and that's obviously a good thing too. And there were a couple months that there were little smaller spikes, but there's not exactly a specific science to it or something that you can say like, aha, that's it. And sometimes they come and sometimes they go. And I remember when I first started in 2022, there was a prior to me, and then for my first period of time as assistant secretary, there was not one fatal accident. And it was a pretty good stretch of time with none. And then one weekend, which was Father's Day weekend, there was, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, but it was over like 2 or 3 days. And they were just, there's no connection to them. They were not really connected. And, one of them was, I think like a 16 or 17-year-old, if I remember correctly. Right. Yeah. So that happens like Father's Day weekend. It's like the first one is assistant secretary. And then, so I'll always remember that. But I say that there are times when there are trends that you can identify, and MSHA works very hard to do that. I don't know that there's one thing that I can really point to. What I would say is I think it's always important to maintain focus and to make that a priority. I don't know if maybe there was complacency that set in. You're also talking about the summer, so there's, right. Especially in the aggregate industry, there's more activity, and there could have been any number of things that could have led to it. But I will say some of the things that we identified from last year, and you still continue to see that are really just basic bread and butter type things that can prevent these things, are doing good examinations, hazard identification, and then fixing the issue, PPE and fall protection, and lockout, tag out, some of those basic things. But you talked about technology, right? And the numbers from last year, if I'm remembering correctly, machinery as a categorization was more than powered haulage, and powered haulage had been up the year before.
Yeah.
This year, overall, I believe powered haulage is down, but it's more than machinery this year. And so both of those, they're different classifications for a reason, but there are similar potential hazards and risks that come along with them as well. And so the broader point is historically, they've always been one of the biggest drivers of serious or fatal accidents. And as you know, we've had a serious focus on them in efforts, including a rulemaking that we did on surface mobile equipment and different things as part of using all of our tools, and some enhanced enforcement efforts that the agencies had. But I think technology certainly does. And you may have noticed in that rulemaking, it doesn't force the adoption of technology, but it requires, as part of that written program that operators have to have, that they at least evaluate and think about technology. And, those are conversations that everybody's having. I went, on the mall last year, and, all the big manufacturers were there. It's like a little mini Mine Expo, maybe.
Yeah.
And walked around, and, everybody there were 2 big things that people were wanted to talk about. One was, electrification of different types of machinery and things that have their own benefits, including on the health side, if you're removing like diesel exhaust and those types of things, that has their own benefits too. But the other thing was like, here are all these safety things that we have. And so, I think a lot of mine operators, and a lot of it just comes down to cost, right? And especially a lot of the bigger operators that have the costs, I've heard over and over again. But when they're getting new equipment, some of them lease equipment and some of them buy their own equipment, and it's across the board. As you get, they buy new equipment, they're prioritizing getting some of these safety features. But, some people still have, and there's a cost associated with retrofitting. But I think it's clear to all of us. Like, I know that I have things in my car that help me that I'm not sure that I would want to go back to not having anymore, right? And we've all seen the value of those things. And even some of my own technical experts, they have presentations and things. They took this camera in our technical support group and set it up to where you can really see from just a webcam how hard it is, like some of those big haul trucks, how obstructed your view is and how you can't see things. And so I would encourage everyone that has the ability to adopt those things. And I think that certainly can be a big thing moving forward in terms of continuing to reduce powered haulage and, machinery fatal accidents. And I'll make a quick analogy on that front. I'll bring the sort of the coal world in a little bit here because, as we work on both ends. But if you look throughout MSHA's history and what used to be the biggest driver of serious and fatal accidents was roof falls. And those have gone down significantly. And part of that is a function of a number of things, but one of it is using technology. And we have an employee, I don't know if you saw it or you want to take a look at it, but Dr. Mark, who works in our technical support program area, he was recognized this year in what's called the Sammys, and people refer to it as like the Oscars for federal employees. But he got the Lifetime Achievement Award throughout the whole federal government. It was a big deal for MSHA in recognition of the work that he's done on reducing roof falls. And part of that is he developed and used data and went out to different mines and used data that people were able to use to look at the different roof structures and like the type of support you need to put in place and all these different types of things. And MSHA has gotten, had a couple years where there were no roof fall fatalities, which would have been unheard of years ago. And so, there's a place for technology to make mines safer and healthier and to use to protect the nation's miners. And I guess I will say, I hope so. I hope that some of those technological things that are either already out there or have yet to be developed will help us get to where, we no longer have serious or fatal accidents and things. Because those things are crucial parts of the mining process. So, they're not going away. You got to move the product, right?
That's right.
But if we can do it safer and reduce the risks that miners face, then those are absolutely things we should continue to take a look at and use.
All right. Well, that was Chris Williamson, Assistant Secretary of the Mine Safety and Health Administration, or MSHA. We appreciate Chris getting together again ahead of the holidays to kind of reflect on his 2.5 years there at the agency in Washington. Obviously, we're going to have another Assistant Secretary because, as Biden shifts from Trump, we're going to have a new leader at the helm there at MSHA.
See, I was pretty sure Trump was going to keep him on. I figured, it's just one of those things. Just hang around, Chris. Why not?
Now and again, I feel like you see an agency head stick around. Sometimes it happens. It doesn't happen often.
No, it definitely does not.
And I suppose politics are a little more fiery today. So, every president wants his or her person heading those agencies. But it'll probably be another year, hopefully sooner, before we see another head at MSHA. I guess having been at the magazine for 10 plus years at this point, and I've seen a couple of different presidents come in, and it's not a matter of January 21 we're going to have another person at the agency. It takes time. They have to be nominated and approved by the Senate, and I think the last one, being Chris Williamson, it took over a year, and the one before that was David Zetesla, and I think it was pushing a year before that process got completed. And we actually had a piece run in the magazine recently, Jack. Bill Duran and Margot Lopez, they monthly write our MSHA in the Law column, and they focus part of their piece on who the next leader at MSHA will be, and at least what they would represent. And they were advocating that the time has maybe arrived for somebody from the aggregates industry, more so the metal, non-metal side, to maybe be tasked with leading MSHA, because I guess we haven't really had that to date. And MSHA historically, traditionally has been thought of as a coal organization, but I think the needle's moving a little bit, and we're hopeful that that takes place because that would benefit the aggregate sector because somebody who, has some experience there could be good for the industry.
Right, and I feel like it goes to a conversation you and I have had, and we've had as a staff at Pit and Quarry, and we probably even talked about it on the show, is that you have mining, and aggregates really is kind of its own little niche within the mining industry. Like, it is mining, but it definitely isn't obviously the coal mining, the gold mining, these types of mining that people think of when you think mining. And yeah, you mentioned Bill Duran and Margot Lopez's piece, and I think that goes back to one of the maybe main critiques I heard from people when, be it at trade shows or be it at different events when, the topic of MSHA, Chris Williamson, got brought up, is that, I don't think anyone questioned his merits, his experience, but I think a lot of people were kind of the same view of Bill and Margot, where it's like, we just want someone that really knows this industry and isn't as, their experience lies more within that aggregate metal, non-metal realm as opposed to coal, so that they can sort of take into account certain things that goes on in aggregate that might be a little different in coal or that you might not have to consider with coal. So I think that'll definitely be interesting to see where Trump goes and who he chooses. Because I think, if they can get someone in that is more aggregate focused, I think there could be a lot of great things happening on the MSHA side in the industry as far as, better enforcement that I think maybe producers would be more apt to sort of take on, sort of more, maybe some just a better understanding of what aggregate producers are doing on a daily basis. So it'll be an interesting, probably, like you said, at least a year, maybe close to a year and a half. So yeah, certainly nothing right away, but be keeping our eye on it for sure.
Yeah, MSHA's day-to-day work will surely continue. That doesn't go away. They have to do their 2s and 4s, as Chris Williamson alluded to it during the interview. But to Chris Williamson's credit, he did do the work to get to know different parts of the mining industry, and that includes aggregates. I think early on, maybe even in the first months of his tenure, I remember seeing a release come out. I think it was from the National Stone Sand and Gravel Association, Jack, about how he had visited a Lux Stone site. During the interview we just play, he referenced a visit to Tilcon in Connecticut. So, mining's such a vast territory, and you can only kind of hail from one end or the other. So I think he made efforts to get to know our industry, because if you're going to be setting forth rules on aggregates and other parts of the metal, non-metal sector, I mean, you need to kind of, as he described, get in, do those site visits. And, he said those were some of the most valuable things that he did during his 2.5 years with MSHA, during this period, because he was with MSHA in a different role during the Obama administration. So I think we talked too about the fatalities issue, and, that's something we're continuously reporting on at the magazine, Jack. And, you alluded earlier, I think when we last published a piece, it was just an update about what was happening in 2024. That was an interesting narrative that we kind of pushed out 4 or 5 times in 2024, just with some updates about how we were trending as an industry. And it was really solid for the majority of the year. I know I would go over to your desk just with an update as we're wanting to put out some safety content, some MSHA updates. And I remember just having conversations with you probably partway into the year last year, thinking, man, the industry is really doing well. I mean, we're not seeing these sorts of awful accidents transpire. And then August, September rolled around, and there were 13. I asked the assistant secretary about that, and there's not, like he said, there's not really one thing you can ever point to. I think he kind of put it well when he broadly said, basic blocking and tackling, just having the right mindset, being aware, having conversations, PPE, doing workplace exams, and repairing things and addressing things that need to be addressed. So just having that core playbook in your back pocket and going about mining work every day, you have to keep that mindset. Safety's always got to be 100. It can't be 99.
Absolutely. And you think about what sort of the broad message that, the Martin Marietta's, the Vulcans, really any producer, is that, they want everyone, like you said, it can't be 99, it's 100%. They want everyone that comes in to leave the same way that they entered starting that day. And it's one of those things where, as we talk about it, it's something that we can kind of maybe casually is the wrong word, but we kind of do casually talk about fatality numbers and how it's trending and how things are going in the industry. But, at the end of the day, it's one of those situations. One is too many. And it really was kind of disheartening once we got to that August and September, because it was really trending so well. And, in a way, it's sort of how do you look at it? Because like Chris Williamson said, there's not one thing you can point to for this. What was it, 13 fatality spike in 2 months? So, I mean, that accounts for almost half of last year's fatalities in 2 months alone. So do you look at it as, okay, it was 2 bad months? Or, was there some kind of, obviously these all happen at different things, so you can't necessarily say there was a pattern, but is there a common denominator? It's just, it's an unfortunate reality of this industry that, when you're working with this type of equipment and working with these kind of materials, those are the dangers and risks you present. But, I mean, at least compared to, I think 2 years ago when we hit 40, I mean, that being down to 28, still 28 too many, but certainly seems like it's going in the right direction. And, the onus on safety is only increasing from what at least I'm hearing from producing companies and people that are out there every day.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as we talk about things on this show, Jack, like autonomous haulers and safety sensors, other technology that can help make operations more safe. Like, can we press to that zero barrier, get to no fatalities, no accidents of any nature, let alone fatal accidents. There may be a day, I suppose that's possible. And I mean, just for greater context too, we talk a lot about safety in a negative framework, I suppose, sometimes. But if you look historically at our industry, I mean, we're operating near or virtually at all-time lows as an industry. We're very safe. The last 30, 40 years, you talk to some of the, the most veteran people in our industry, they're going to share with you how safety is a value today, that it wasn't necessarily in place in the 70s and the 60s, totally different mindset. MSHA came about in the 70s. I don't know if that coincides with some of that. MSHA would argue that they've helped to bring along safety as well, and that's certainly their role. That's what they're tasked by Congress to do, is ensure the safety and health of miners. But I think we can probably continue to lower that fatal accident total every year with the use of technology, and I think we're probably not too far off from some things that are really special that can help take people out of harm's way.
It goes back to, and again, I'm sure this is something I've brought up on this show before, but I know you and I have talked about it multiple times. There was, I forget what it may have been just sort of an end of year fatality update that we did, a year or two ago. It may have even been the 40 fatality year back in 22, but you had kind of pulled data from like 1910 up until now, going every 10 years. And I remember looking at this chart back in like the early 1900s. It was like over 1,000 fatalities a year, or even in 10 years, which is still hundreds of fatalities a year. It's just mind-boggling. And you look at old pictures, we always have a look back. Mm-hmm. And some of my favorite ones are seeing guys in dozers or in loaders. And they got a pipe in their mouth, zero protection on, no cab in the, or no covering to the cab, and they're just out there in the open lifting this rock at like a 60-degree angle, waiting for. And I'm just looking at it, and I'm like,
not a good look.
I'm like, what?
Yeah.
If like looking at this now, it gives you like a panic attack.
Right.
But I mean, that's just the way it was. So I mean, and obviously, you mentioned when MSHA was kind of instituted and the corresponding drop in fatalities. So yeah, certainly have come a long way for sure. It's just kind of humorous almost at times to look back at how little there was done to really actually protect people now or then compared to now.
What else is happening at Pit and Quarry? Well, by now we're in mid-January, and we've got a Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame class likely announced. So I would say check out our website, pitandquarry.com. We went through the selection process over the holidays and just wanted to make sure we got in touch with everybody who's being enshrined this year. So before I put the names out there, I just want to make sure that we do our homework here internally and make sure everyone's aware before they are listening to Drilling Deeper and realize they're going in the Hall of Fame or so-and-so is going on the Hall of Fame. So check the website. We hopefully have that announcement up there by now. And for our next episode, Jack, I think you've got some details on what listeners can expect.
Yes, sir. Next time, you'll be 2 weeks from now on Tuesday the 28th. I'll be sitting down with Paul Ross of Douglas Romeka. He'll be talking a little bit about what the company has going on with Douglas getting acquired by Romeka and the working relationship they have going now, sort of that integration of Romeka and Douglas together. A new facility that Douglas and Romeka have in the works down in Alabama now, as well as some new equipment rolling out in January. Don't want to give it all away, but it's a pretty cool sounding roller. As well as revolutionizing conveyor roller systems to reduce maintenance and enhancing productivity. So be sure to tune in 2 weeks from now for my conversation with Paul Ross from Douglas Romeka. Always good to talk with Paul. He's, we worked with him a lot. He's a great guy to talk with, super knowledgeable, and just a great guy. So you're not going to want to miss that.
Well, look forward to hearing that, Jack. And thanks again to Chris Williamson for sharing his insights and reflecting on his 2.5 years at the head of MSHA. Jack, again, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everyone else out there listening, and we'll catch you next time on episode 33.
Happy 2025.